Three words of wisdom number 2 from Yoda. Do or do not. There is no try. I'm thinking Yoda must have been a watercolorist. There a resemblance? Maybe a little? Hello minders, welcome back to the Mind of Watercolor. So glad you could join me today. Yeah, I know I don't always wear my glasses for the intro. I need them all the time, but they catch a glare sometimes on my light box. But today, for some reason, I left them on, wasn't thinking about it. Apologize if you get a glare, but so glad you could be with me. And we're going to do a demo today that's been requested over and over and over and over again. Why I haven't done it, I don't know, but water reflections. And I'm just going to show you my basic process for doing water reflections. Pretty simple. Will take some practice, but I think you can get it if you just try. Do. Sorry, Yoda. There are a lot of ways to do reflections, but these are the ways I like to do it. I'm going to show you a couple different methods, and I'll get pretty detailed with it. You can be simpler with them, and we'll talk about that in the demo. But hang on to the end, because I'm going to do a giveaway. My 200,000 subscriber, 5-year channelversary, World Watercolor Month, put whatever qualifier you want in there with it, giveaway. And I have 2 really great packages to give away. One for each 100,000. So we'll do that at the end, but on to the What? That's not your favorite Yoda saying? What's your favorite Yoda saying? Number 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Fear is the path to the dark side. Well, I want there to be no fear when you try to paint water reflections. On to the demo. Alright, so I'm going to just start by putting in a couple of little tree stands over a lake or a pond or something along that line. Just something simple to illustrate my point. I'm not going to go into how to do this since I want to spend my time on reflections. Now, I'm on about a 30 to 45 degree angle, I guess, and that will come into play very shortly in the reflections. Just add a few different features here that I can, some contrast that I can reflect in the water. I usually like to have a fairly dark base to my shoreline. You know, don't just draw a heavy single weight outline though. Make it kind of interesting and organic. Make it sort of a darker shade of whatever the embankment is. But it's just nice to have a dark line. And you'll see that maybe not quite as pronounced, but since there are shadows at the base of most landscape features like clumps of trees and underbrush and grasses, there's usually a little bit of a shadow line along the shoreline. Again, though, it breaks up, so make it irregular, but this will be the dividing line of your shore and your water. And you need to have reference. You need to observe this in nature to get some of these ideas. If you just try to paint it from your head and you haven't done it very much, you're going to have a hard time. I don't even like to do it unless I have some kind of reference. So let's take a look at this. So this right here is a good example of the way I typically do reflections. I have what I call sort of a generic reflection approach, and I do it most of the time. A lot of that is because I'm not trying to feature the reflection. It just is there to state that that's water. Now generally this shows usually all the ways that reflections can appear. That's why I like this reference. The stiller the water, and you can see the water is pretty still over here, the more exact the reflections. The more aberrations there are on the surface of the water, the more diffused it looks. And it almost always looks like it's running straight down, like it's bleeding. I mean, that's tailor-made for watercolor. And you can see dark shoreline shadows at the base of some of these. You don't see it as a hard line everywhere, but I do like to make sure I have some kind of line. And then where the water is more disturbed, you see this kind of thing broken up. So I'm going to do both kinds here. And you'll also notice how it picks up some of the color. But the reason I like to do reflections like this is it's simple, it's quick. It keeps your focus and feature on the details of the landmass. And you're doing a painting, you're not doing a photo recreation. So you can use some artistic license. I like to make these reflections lighter. Now you can see they're a little bit lighter in value than this. I rarely ever do mirror reflections. They're kind of rare in nature. You have to have almost glass-like water. And I think this, in a painting, this effect communicates water more clearly than does a glass mirror-like reflection. That may work in a photo. Don't think it works very well in a painting. And there's a lot of flexibility here. Now here you see about equal reflection to landmass. I usually like to shorten that. And a lot of times, depending on how much disturbance there is in the water, you won't see as much of it. So there's room for creative license. There's room for you to change this and make it your own, make it work with the composition. Alright, so we'll try a couple different approaches. I went ahead and added a little center section further back here, but I am going to do a couple different approaches. I know this sounds painful easy, and I don't mean to make this sound easy. Once you get the hang of it, it is easy. But I guess what I do want to say is simple. Simple and easy are not the same thing. But it's simple because it doesn't take a lot of steps, and you don't want to overwork it as is typical with most watercolor. And I like to keep the water and the pigment. I'm just wetting this. But I tend to add the water and the pigment at the top. And that's why my angle is important, because it works for you in this case. So I'm just, as with any wet and wet wash, and that's what this will be, a wet and wet wash, I'm getting my paper nice and soaked. Let's start with this lightest color. And once I get some pigment running, what I usually do is add it from the top and let it bleed down. As the water takes in and disperses it, it will get a lot paler. I'll come over here with some of that color. And down here where it starts to pool and you can see these droplets forming, this is where I start doing this sort of a thing. And this edge is dry. I mean, it's sort of feathered out to it, but the edge is somewhat dry. And I'm not going to try to work this center section. It's okay, I can do that in a separate layer. It's a 3/4 inch flat. Did I say that? You just want to be approximate with the reflections, you know, in the color. You don't have to be mathematically precise about it. I actually think I'm going to blot this to stop some of that flow. Now if you did this with a round, and you can definitely do this with a round, you'll get a slightly different look. In fact, I may do that over here. And some of this I'll add into this after it's dry. You can come in here while this is drying with clear water. I've got some clear water. And it's easier to lift when it's a little bit wet. I like to keep these sort of aberrations, these disturbances, I guess, closer to the edge. Maybe you could do one up here. And I'm trying not to let any sort of a hard edge form. And you can make this as soft as you want. If you want to go to where it's almost all like this, that's viable too. In fact, I've done that, especially in areas where I wanted to keep it simple. I'm just trying to soften. There's a bit of an edge there. I'll soften some of that edge, so I don't get you know, any vertical hard lines. I don't want that. And I like that. I think I'm going to leave that. I'm probably going to come back with a few additional strokes after that's dry. While that's drying, let's work on this over here. And this is going to be a little less soft. So we'll treat this as though there was a lot of water disturbance. More like this area here. There'll be some wet and wet, but I like to do both. I like to practice both. And I'm just going to start out with a very pale wash. So I'm not starting out wet and wet. I am keeping in mind, though, the colors that are on the bank. And this goes really quick, too. And I'm not doing sky color, but from here down, you know, up in here, you can work in your sky color, too. Same process. And just as always, you know, observation is important. So find photos like this and study them. Study the patterns that these things make. And, you know, don't go overboard. Don't add all these wrinkles and ripples in every square inch. Just use it judiciously. Speaking of reference, I'll post this reference for patrons, as I have been doing very often. So if you want to paint from this photo, you can do that. You want to do a little bit of wet and wet, that's fine. Just be careful to control it so it doesn't get out of hand. And as you add water, when you charge into wet and wet, always reduce your water when you add pigment. Reduce your water or you'll end up with a wet mess where everything just kind of blends together and becomes the same value. This distant one here, whoops, that was a mistake. This distant one here, I'm just going to add a few simple reflections like this. Sometimes you want to bring these shapes down in with color. Painting reflections is a lot of fun. And this is still not dry yet because I want to add a little bit to that. Alright, these are dry. I want to do a little more to these. I want to get some darker streaks in here, similar to this. And it's totally fine to re-wet these and do another glaze, but I'm going to keep it probably closer to the bank. I'm going to start out with clear water, and don't brush it hard because you'll loosen up a lot of that water or paint that's on there. But just a light coating, let it soak in. A somewhat close match to the color. Really don't need a lot, and I'm just gonna rinse out my brush with a little clear water and brush it up just for a little bit of blending, softening the bottom so it doesn't end up in a hard edge down there. But don't overdo it, and you know, I'm real close to that point here, so I'm gonna stop. I want that to dry again. I still have a few things I want to do to the edge. Here I'm not going to do a wet and wet. I'm just going to come back. In fact, I'm going to switch. I think I said I was going to do some of this in a round, and I never did that, but that's alright. I'm going to switch to this oval wash, this Da Vinci Cosmo Top oval wash, and I'm just going to brush in some darker values that way to give it another dimension. And these are matching up to some of these deeper values here. Don't look for tricks. I mean, I'm giving you some tips and tricks, but don't make your rendering count just on tricks. Observe, observe, observe. Paint from observation. I have people all the time ask me, how did you do that? How do you do this? And I said, well, I spent a lot of time looking. And that's the answer for, I don't know, 80–90% of what I do is I spend a lot of time looking. You know, mastering the techniques, mastering your control of the medium, but then spending a lot of time looking at your subject. Well, I'm just finally adding the last touches to the left side here. And I'm using some of the same sort of strokes as you see on the right, but the difference is I'm letting the washes sort of pool together and keeping it softer. It's just allowing me to break up some of that image, that softness. And really you can do this, as I've mentioned already, there's a number of ways. You can keep it soft and streaky, very diffuse. And if you do this like I'm doing now, you just want to be careful. Again, it's a very easy technique to overdo. And finally, I've got this scrubber. Scrubbers come in all shapes and sizes. This one is sort of a very knife edge chisel point. It's great for lines or more linear. Just going to very lightly lift some highlights in here. Keep in mind when you use a scrubber, you don't scrub. You go very gently. Just get a little water on there. Stroke it just enough to loosen up the paint. Just one more technique that adds a nice few touches, but is also a technique that's very easy to overdo. So less is more. Alright, so I know I got fairly detailed, and I keep telling you can do this simply, but here's how I would suggest that you practice. Just give yourself a simple shape to reflect. Then just paint clear water, and I'm really close to the bottom of the page, so I'm just going to paint it right off the edge. I'm just sort of making the width. I'm making it past. There's a little green in my wash, but that's okay. That's good for video because you can see where I'm putting my wash. Normally, though, I would just recommend it be totally clear water. It could be the sky color if you want, a very pale. I'm not going to touch this because this is still drying. I'm going to leave a little bit of white, and that's actually an advantage. I didn't mention that up here, but sometimes I like to leave slivers of white along the embankment. And if I have too much, I can fill it back in. Just come in along the edge right up next to the bank. Let it flow down. Try to match the shape a little bit, but don't go too far. Let it flow down on its own. And if you want to hit the edge again, but if you charge into this again, make sure you drastically reduce the water in your brush. And have mostly pigment. You can bring a little of that bank color in there too. If it's not moving, then you can brush it down a little bit, but don't do that a lot. So anyway, this is how I recommend that you practice. Just do this simple step. Try to get this simple step. If you're able to do this and you want to take it a little further, then try cleaning and drying out your brush really well. Maybe pick up a few little horizontal kind of features. No paint. It's okay to pull some of that paint out. There's something to be said for keeping it simple, and there's something to be said for adding a few little aberrations. That's how I would practice that. And then the more confident you become doing that soft reflection, then you can work towards things like this. I scrubbed away the edges there just so you won't get distracted by the fact that I painted in green. But fill that area with clear water to practice this. Alright, hope that helps you. Let's go do a giveaway. I'm going to give away 2 of these packages, 2 identical packages. A pad of 100% cotton Canson Heritage. Very, very nice, very fine paper. It's 140-pound cold press watercolor paper. A brand new set. These have just come on the market. In fact, you probably can't even find them yet at the publishing of this video. They're that new. Albrecht Durer watercolor markers. Yeah, pigmented artist quality watercolor markers. It's a set of 10. And by the way, each marker has a bullet tip and a brush tip on the end. And so you can play with these and also palette them and mix them. I will be including a half sheet of Yupo, which is great for mixing. You just scribble it down on the paper. It's a polypropylene plastic paper. You just scribble your marker down, your different colors, and you can mix them. And you can use them like regular watercolor with a brush. At some point, definitely I'll be doing a video about these markers and getting a little more into ways to use them. But for the meantime, if you win this, you can experiment with them. You can go to your watercolor friends and say, "Hi, I've got something I bet you don't have." And last but not least, a Princeton Elite number 8 round. Now I have, one for each package. These are not brand new. This is the only thing the package is not brand new, but they're very, very gently used. And they're great brushes. I have a number of Princeton Elites and I just love them. It's quickly becoming one of my absolute favorite synthetics and I use them a lot. So that's your package. There's 2 of them. Now to enter, all you need to do is be subscribed, make a comment below and say, "I want the thank you package." Make sure that's in the comment. If you want the package. If you want to just leave a comment and you're not really interested in this package, then don't include that phrase. But if you include that phrase, "I want the thank you package," you'll be entered. And in a couple weeks, I will pick a winner and give away 2 of these packages, along with the half sheet of Yupo. Thanks everybody. Hope you enjoyed this video today. Look forward to your comments. Thank you so much, patrons, for supporting and sponsoring this channel. See everybody in the next video. Bye-bye.